Now, let's move on to make the second row with half double crochet stitches. Take the first row you have made and mark the final stitch with a stitch marker. Put the hook back into the big loop. Pull the working yarn to adjust the loop to an appropriate size that fits on the hook. Put the working yarn back in your hand. Turn your piece over to the other side. Then make 2 chain stitches to form a turning chain. 1, 2. For a row that will be made with half double crochet stitches, usually you will need to make 2 chain stitches to form the turning chain. Sometimes a crochet pattern might call for a different number of chain stitches to make. In that case, you will follow the pattern's instruction. A pattern will also specify if this turning chain is counted as a stitch or not. Let's first look into the situation when a turning chain is considered a stitch. When a turning chain counts as a stitch, no matter how many chain stitches are made to form the turning chain, the entire chain will be viewed as one stitch. Like here, we will view this turning chain as the first half double crochet stitch for the second row. Let's put a stitch marker in the chain stitch on the top here, because later when we crochet the third row, the final stitch will be made into this top chain stitch of the turning chain. If counting V-shapes, the first 2 V-shapes that are the closest to the hook represent the turning chain, and they will be counted as one stitch. The third V-shape here, marked with a blue stitch marker, is the final stitch from the first row and the first stitch of the row to work into when making the second row. However, we will not make a half double crochet stitch into here, because the turning chain is viewed as the first half double crochet stitch for the second row. We can think it this way. The space in the first stitch of the row is occupied by the turning chain. So we will skip the first stitch of the row here and make the first real half double crochet stitch into the next stitch. Remove the stitch marker. Yarn over. Skip the first stitch of the row. Insert the hook into the second stitch of the row. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over again and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. 1 stitch is made. Between the turning chain and the stitch we just made, we can see the V shape of the stitch we skipped. Continue to make 1 half double crochet stitch into each of the remaining stitches of the row. Now, we come to the end of the row. Usually, if the turning chain for the second row is considered a stitch, these 2 chain stitches we skipped when making the first row will also be considered a stitch. So, we will make the second row's final stitch into the top chain stitch here. Let's see where to insert your hook to make the final stitch. Here, the stitch marker is placed under both loops of the V shape. This loop in the back is the back bump of the chain stitch. After yarn over, you can insert your hook under the 2 loops of the V shape. You can see the back bump is under your hook. Or you can insert your hook under the back bump and 1 loop of the V. Looking from the other side, you can see your hook going through the center of the V. From this side, you can see 2 loops of the chain stitch are on the top of the hook. You might also see some crocheters place the hook under the entire chain. Some patterns might specify where to insert the hook when working into a turning chain. If not, it can just be based on your preference. But I do recommend placing your hook under 2 loops of the chain stitch so the final stitch will sit more stably. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over again and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. The final stitch is made and the second row is finished. When counting the number of the stitches in a row, remember to count the turning chain as 1 stitch. So here in the second row, there are 1, the turning chain as 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 stitches in total. Working on the third row and beyond is similar to making the second row. You will turn your piece and make a turning chain. Using a stitch marker here is optional but recommended, especially when you are just getting started. Then, yarn over. Skip the first stitch of the row. Starting from the second stitch of the row, make 1/2 double crochet stitch into each of the stitches of the row. When approaching the end of the row, remember to work into the top chain stitch of the turning chain. Practice by making more rows with 1/2 double crochet stitches. You might notice that we use stitch markers a lot. They are helpful reminders to prevent you from missing a stitch or forgetting where to insert the hook. I recommend using them especially when you have just started crocheting. As you are making more rows, you might start to notice that there are holes on the side. This is because, though a turning chain here represents a 1/2 double crochet stitch, it's still thinner than a real one. So the space here will be larger than the spaces between each real 1/2 double crochet stitch, so there will be gaps. Once you've made the desired number of rows, fasten off the yarn and weave in ends. Next, let's look into situations when a turning chain is not considered a stitch. Like before, these 2 V-shapes represent the turning chain. And here, this is the first stitch of the row to work into. And this time, we will work into this stitch because the turning chain does not count as a stitch. So we will make the first real 1/2 double crochet stitch into here. Take the stitch marker off. Yarn over and insert the hook. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over again and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. 1/2 double crochet stitch is made. The next one will be made into the next stitch of the row here. Continue to make 1/2 double crochet stitch into each of the remaining stitches of the row. Now we come to the end of the row. Usually, if the turning chain is not considered a stitch, These 2 chain stitches we skipped when making the first row will not be considered a stitch either. So we don't need to work into the chain stitch here, and the second row is finished. Note that we are talking about general situations. Always check to see what a pattern specifies. Working on the third row and beyond is similar. No stitch of the row will be skipped in the beginning and no stitch will be made into the turning chain in the end. Using stitch markers in the process is optional, but they do help you see where the stitches are. How do you know if a turning chain is considered a stitch or not? The quick answer is, check what a pattern says. Here are a few examples that a pattern uses to clarify if a turning chain is considered a stitch or not.